He is the head of regulated and financial institutions at the Cardano Foundation. And he will be speaking about how blockchain is changing the systems of the world. Thank you for being here, Sandro. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Nikki. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here again. A year passed. What a year it was. Do we have the... here we go. Good. Yeah, it was quite a year which you have behind of us, especially when you think about what we experienced across different markets and industries, speaking about centralized entities, decentralized entities, and how blockchain actually plays a role in it. So one of the battlefields or spaces we have, or we still had, was a bit the discussion about private versus public blockchains, so permissionless, permissioned blockchains, and what type of value do they add to each other. And we have seen a shift actually from more the private permission blockchains where we see a move to the public permission space due to actually enterprises realizes that the value you can create when you look at the blockchain trilemma, when you look about security, decentralization, scalability, actually relies on a system which is much further decentralized and not in the hand of one single entity. Now, the question is how we can merge certain things, and we'll touch base on this a little later on today. But another thing which is very important is that what the industry showed, the blockchain industry, protocols managed actually to get, or to not resolve completely, but to get on a very good stage where you have a secure base layer, a very good type of decentralization, and also a level of scalability which allows enterprises to run actually a lot of transactions and high volume businesses. One of the core discussions we still have from time to time is about consensus. When we speak about the consensus, how we find agreement, we still have this kind of narrative that blockchain requires a lot of energy. So just briefly, most of you will be aware of that, but it's always still this narrative we quickly have to touch base on and discuss what are the different consensus models. Obviously, there are multiple of them. So focusing here on the two most common ones, especially when you look at actually what happened last year with the merge of Ethereum. And so when we talk about proof of work with Bitcoin and previous to the merge, what Ethereum was running off, that was actually the race to the first. So who resolves this mathematical equation as first? So if I want to be faster than you, I simply buy more CPU and add more computing power to increase my chances. And then you do the same, and so we just race against each other, adding more and more computing power. While proof of stake is a game theory, so actually depends on the stake you have on the protocol level, you actually have this random organization or random way, the process that stakes get chosen, and depending on who actually has the stake can validate the blocks. So it's way less energy consumption, and you can control it a bit better in a way that how you actually manage the power. So the more power you have, the more chances you have to actually mint the block, or the more stake you have, the higher the chances for you to validate the block. So what happened here as well to kind of protect that one stake pool just actually has the majority of stake. What we have on Cardano is liquid staking by design. So what does it mean? Many people of you as well know that when we talk about proof of stake, you suddenly think about lock-in periods, you think about slashing, you think about all these things which kind of inherent risk associated to it when you talk about liquidity. The way Cardano is built is actually in a way that you have a so-called delegation key. So when I want to delegate my ADA I have in my wallet, I want to delegate it to your stake pool, I can do this on the architecture level in a way that the delegation key assigns my stake to your stake pool without having my assets ever leaving my wallet. So I control those assets, I can sell, I can transfer without having a lockup period, without having a risk of slashing, and without of pledging the assets. That changes a lot in a way when you talk about collateral management for financial institutions, as an example. When you talk about certain Basel III regulations, how can you access your assets and how liquid are they? And this is something which is very interesting when I speak with banks and other financial institutions. The other thing is actually then, why should I delegate to a pool? And what is, or how can we avoid that a pool gets too strong in the ecosystem? The way we are working here is with the so-called K level. So what we have is a factoring, which is a mathematical way. Right now, the optimal amount of stake pools defined originally is 500. So what happens is now is actually look at how much ADA is right now in circulation. You divide this through this optimal amount of pools of 500, and then you get to this so-called saturation level. So when you run a stake pool, right now it's a bit more than this 64 million you see here, because this grows with the higher the circulation is in the ecosystem. But when it's defined at 64 million, so up to 64 million, you can actually grow, and the protocol distributes the rewards. So at 64 million, you have the optimal saturation. Anything which is above this level will be diminished by the protocol. That means there is no incentive for you to grow above 64 million. And with this, you can start preventing one single stake pool to actually get too large. What we see now, and which is very exciting as well in our journey to actually change governance model and to include the community, the ecosystem, any one of you who wants to participate in a permissionless blockchain, is to actually become part of the future decision and development here. So what we happen right now, it's a so-called, we have a test poll running right now, where we talk about, shall this K factor be changed? So instead of 500 pools to 1,000 pools, as an example. That means that actually the saturation level will decrease. We can, with this, support further decentralization. There is also a factor with the minimal fee they receive, the stake pool operators. And each stake pool had the opportunity to participate and give their vote to the options provided, what they would like to see. After the period where the stake pool voted, we have another 2 epochs where the delegators can actually look and see, I have delegated to this stake pool. This stake pool voted for option 3, but I as delegator rather want to see option 2. I see your stake pool voted for option 2. I can redelegate my stake in this period of time now. So we give anyone the option to actually participate and become an active participant in this beautiful ecosystem. This is something which is amazing, which we haven't seen like this in the past. So when we go back a bit to this blockchain trilemma, where we start off and we think about security, decentralization, and then scalability. Within the Cardano Foundation and Cardano, how we look at it, right? So we have three layers when you look at this graph behind me. So the layer at the bottom, this is really the core stack. That's a network stack. This has been built and written in Haskell, so this is super solid. This is actually the validation of the security of the Cardano network. Then you have the second layer. So here we talk about the value creation layer. Here is everything what is built on top of it, right? So we have here layer one additions, either on the protocol level or also layer 2 solutions. We will come back to this a bit later. But what you see and what is important, you have in between, you have the stake pool operators right on the right-hand side here. So the stake pool operators, again, those are the ones operating the network. So those are the ones which are so important for the whole ecosystem to function, why they have as well the priority, or why they have the recognition from us to actually be a strong participant and be the ones taking part in the decision-making process. The other one, what you can see a bit more on the left-hand side, is the so-called member-based organization. So within our roadmap towards a new governance model, it's the MBO is something we are working on in our Voltaire roadmap in this phase right now, creating an organization which actually has an off-chain governance. And this is right now being established through various different entities who are in Cardano since the very beginning, but also here including anyone who is in the ecosystem already. There will be on Saturday, there will be a governance workshop in Zug, in the CV Labs as well, where participants from Texas, from the community, from the NFT space, various different members who are active in the Cardano ecosystem and providing actually a lot of added value, being it on GitHub or wherever they can contribute. They will be there and help to design this new governance model and see how we can help each other to get away from a system as you know it today, but more into a minimal decentralization and give as much as possible into an open source space. So the value creation layer is really here to ensure that we have a predictable, reliable, and resilience infrastructure for anyone who wants to build on. And then you go on to the third level, the value capture level. Here's actually where we see the adoption happening. So we have different entities, we have different needs. How can they bridge their business model into blockchain? So that can be the legacy business as an example. Legacy business, they do need components, they do need the tooling to upgrade their systems. We have decentralized dApps. Those are the ones which are building natively, right? So those don't need maybe the bridge a centralized system, but they need the tooling to create a new innovative business model. And the idea here is that over time, and we see this already, the screen, the value capture layer, becomes bigger, while the blue layer, it's getting a bit smaller. Why do I say that? The idea, again, here is actually community engagement, open sourcing. So when we add to open source, being it on the code base, what we do as the foundation, as an example, shall be done by the community as well. And we see this. We see that the community is building and open sourcing it. So they provide direct contribution into the value creation layer. And this is something which is very beautiful because we can see that it starts to become self-continuing, right? So it starts to feed itself from the very engine it lives off. When we talk about, again, this value capture layer, and that's on purpose not completely filled here, what we have seen, it's a very nice move, let's call it like this. So when you look at the circle on the outside, that's the blockchain skeptics ones. So a year, 2 years back, a lot of discussions we had were actually with enterprises, with regulators, and they just said, blockchain, no, stay away. So they didn't really want to work with blockchain. We see a lot of shift happening from traditional financial institutions to actually enterprises across industries, but also regulators, becoming a bit more accepting blockchain as a technology and to want to learn more or to already engaging with it. And then we have the inner circle where we have the Cardano ecosystem. Why do I show you to this? And as well here, there's just some of the names here. It's actually to highlight where we can focus on. So we do see a very strong ecosystem in Cardano right now. And this is what we have to actually leverage in a way that we have to introduce them and work with them very close, helping them become decision maker, become part of the governance structure. So here is actually this integration happening. Then we also see the circle in the middle where we see there is a lot of institutions, and you can, as an example, say on the legacy side, a Coca-Cola as an example. They are already having a department looking into blockchain. So there is an incentive there for them to work with blockchain, and those are the ones we can support through education and new tools to actually make the step. Then we have on the decentralized dApps, you have probably as well Uniswap, right? You can put many, many names there. Those are the ones which we see are active, and now the question is how we can actually support them and how we can as well support interoperability with them. So the focus is in the inner circle, the middle circle, but less on the outer circle as it was back in the days. We still have to educate, we still have to do marketing there, to raise awareness and change some of the narratives, but we have a very strong inner and middle circle where we can now create change and drive adoption. Within the foundation, when we look at how can we achieve our core goals for 2023 as well, so the focus areas we have is operational resilience, adoption and education. How can we get there and how can we help on the value creation layer to actually help anyone who wants to build on Cardano? It's the Cardano mainnet support. So as well, again, making sure that this very layer 0, the network stack, that this remains as robust as it is. Also making sure that we have technical enablers which allow you to actually not only use Haskell, because most of the people, when we speak with developers, when we speak with banks as an example, they don't have people with the skill set. So enabling other languages you can write on, and there is a good amount of new languages you can actually use to bridge even with someone who is skilled in JavaScript or whatsoever, to actually write and put a new dApp on Cardano. And that's something we have to drive, we have to support and open the space to make it accessible for everyone. Voltaire governance, I already touched base a bit on before. Education, it's one of the key elements mentioned before. So we do have regular exchange with regulatory bodies around the globe to actually help to understand what blockchain can do, what it cannot do. And what this is about is actually to allow smart regulation. So we need to have international standards. If we want to go back talking about legacy businesses, they need to adhere to local jurisdiction. They have to comply with regulatory requirements. So we need to have regulatory standards. We need to have an agreement as well with the regulators how it can be executed. So that's why we strongly as well communicate and educate. We participated with the Financial Stability Board in a questionnaire and are very close to the FCA or as well to the MSA in Singapore. So there are various different conversations happening on this side. You also see the growth enablers. So how can we help the community and new partners to grow? There's one of it is the Cardano Summit as an example. We have seen this last year. It was here in Switzerland in Lausanne, where we brought actually a lot of people together, and that was beautiful to see. So we had the existing ecosystem supporting potential new partners who wanted to build on Cardano, teaching, educating, helping each other to find the right gateway to get where they want to be. And the result is actually that we have seen new businesses, new ideas actually arising, building and interconnecting with existing partners, but also leveraging new partners. This is something which is very beautiful to actually bring the community and new people together. Then we have the educational program, the Cardano Academy. We launched this year the Alpha program, where we're right now collecting the feedback, what we can improve. But what we realized as well is there is a lot of education happening around different blockchain topics, which you can participate in universities or some special programs from industry partners. What we said, we need to have a program which doesn't only teach about blockchain, but it's also certified on the blockchain. So the Alpha program we had first now was really about the basics. So if you don't have any idea about blockchain, you can get from actually not knowing what blockchain is to a level where you understand how you can actually connect to mainnet, how you can run certain applications and understand what the opportunities with blockchains are. In the next phase, it will be a bit more Cardano-centric, and this is being built on. The idea here is the education should be accessible to everyone. This is one of the key elements here. We're still going back to this permissionless, public permissionless access right? So we building this Cardano Academy, which will be accessible for everyone. You will see a link later on if you want to register for an early access, which I highly recommend for anyone to check, because this is something which is very beautiful. We are speaking with enterprises, we are speaking with universities who actually want as well to implement what we are building here, because all the content we are creating is open sourced. So that means that you as an institution or university, you can in-source this and provide your employees a platform where you can educate and certify them on chain. And this is something which has a lot of actually positive feedback from the market, that we start helping them to get onto the next level about this beautiful technology. Open source, another topic which is very important, and just here with the Academy, one of the examples, but it's also our community. I saw that we had for our Bluetooth backend application as an example, one of the community member open sourced the code towards the whole industry, so anyone knows how they can actually connect with the mainnet. One of the things we are proud of and we always wanted to achieve is change the mindset. Change the way. So upgrading the world means as well changing the way we're interacting today. And what we did with the UNHCR, That's the United Nations organization which looks after the refugees and displaced people. So what we did with the UNHCR, we had the discussion with them last year about donations. And what you usually do, you have this one-off donation. I come to you, ask you for 50 Swiss franc, 100 Swiss franc. You give it to me. It left your pocket, and they have a one-off payment and work with them. So we said, how can we use technology to make something which is more sustainable and which actually helps the UNHCR on the long term, so not on the short term, whenever there is something happening somewhere in the world, because they have so many different places they support, which we start to ignore. We always see what happens in the media, but there are so many other regions they are supporting which don't have the media attention, and people always donate to a certain cause they are aware of. So they forget about Congo or what happened in other regions. And this is something where we said, okay, we need to change as well this narrative and give people the options a bit to vote. To begin with, what we did is actually we set up a stake pool with UNHCR. The stake pool parameter is set to 100% marginal fee. What that means is if I delegate ADA to the stake pool, all the rewards will go to the UNHCR. 80% of the rewards the UNHCR places straight onto the field with the refugees, and 20% go into the innovation fund, where we now look into other applications, how we can change the operating system based on blockchain to support the UNHCR on various different ways to make it more efficient and transparent. So what is the difference now in the main mindset? As I mentioned before, I come to you today, ask, can you give me 50 Swiss francs? You say yes, you give it to me, and then it's gone, so you don't have this 50 franc anymore. If I come to you now and would say, would you actually be open to delegate your ADA to the stake pool, waive the future rewards, but not losing any of your liquidity? It changes the way how you can donate, because you don't lose money straight away, but you actually just waive future rewards. And if something happens today, if you break your leg now, and you need money for the hospital or for transport whatsoever, you take the ADA you delegated, it's always liquid, right? So you can take it. And this changes a lot in the way how people can donate. And we have seen that this is as well when we're talking with private individuals, but also with enterprises, a totally different way to participate, because it also opens a way that you can say, how can I support humanitarian aid and have a reliable reporting, ESG reporting behind it? And this can be accomplished with solutions like this. You will hear later on today, UNHCR is here as well, Olivier, from him a lot about what they are doing. They are super active in the blockchain space, and I'm happy to see whatever they do, being it with Cardano or with other protocols, to actually support blockchain within the United Nations. What helps blockchain to survive and how we can change the system of the world? We bridging from permission to permissionless, from private to public blockchains, but obviously certain industries, certain institutions, they need to have a private layer. They need to make sure that they can have the privacy. So one of the things we can do is actually working with side chains. And as an example, what you can see here is a Hydra sidechain. So it's an isomorphic state channel, which means that actually what you can do, you have the on-chain Cardano mainnet. You have an opening balance. You can actually move on to the Hydra side channel. And then on the Hydra side channel, you have your participants. So you can control your participants. You can control all the transactions. You can, including the fees, including the conditions you set on the state channel. And then you have your transactions. That can be that you want to say you actually put them on an hourly basis, on a daily basis, depending on your business model. You can put actually the closing balance on chain again and make it immutable by having it on the mainnet. But before you do that, you can actually have your own closed environment with your own conditions and with your privacy layer. So this allows you actually to start connect the value of a public permissionless blockchain being immutable, being secure, with this private layer where you can have your own conditions. And this is something where we as well see bridging a lot of legacy systems into the public permissionless world. The other thing is we always have to think about how can we survive, or when we implement a solution today, will it be here in the next 20, 30 years? Because this is when we want to change social systems, financial systems. That's not something for today and tomorrow, but that's for decades to come. So you also have to consider, when you look into the different protocols, how do they survive over time? So there needs to be a rewards mechanism supporting the stake pool operators who operate the protocol, but also making sure that there is a sustainable way with a fixed supply, that there will always be also a reward to be paid out. So it's important that you make sure that you have a transaction fee, that you have a fee model which is sustainable, which is predictable. So when you look at Cardano, what we have is a so-called base fee. And then you have a second fee, which is based on the amount of bytes you put on top of it. So in difference to some of the other protocols you may know, so that means you don't rely on the contingency of the network, but you can actually calculate the fee based on your business model. So it's predictable. You can run it on a testnet if you want to do it first, but it's predictable, and it's reliable, and it's resilient. So now coming back about what does this have to do with actually funding the reserve, or making sure that there is enough incentive for stake pool operators to participate in the system. This is all about transaction diversity. So the more diverse transactions are, the more comes into this reserve pot. So in this example, it's about the metadata. So what's important with metadata, jumping a bit faster in consideration of time, what is important here with metadata? When you look into a transaction, a single transaction, if I transfer one ADA from A to B, that's super cheap. There is not a lot of bytes in it. But when I start to add metadata into such a transaction, you pay more because you transfer more value. And we have here as an example, just to give a bit an idea what we're talking about here. You can see Bitcoin with about 50 bytes. You can see Ethereum with 70 bytes. And then you can see Cardano has on its transaction level 60,000 bytes capabilities on a transaction level. So what does that mean? You can have a transaction where you have the whole chapter, first chapter of War and Peace from Leo Tolstoy with 11,500 bytes. You can have the first three chapters of our beloved Voltaire with Candide and maxed up at 16,000 bytes. So this allows you to put a lot of validation, a lot of information into a transaction without the need of running a smart contract at the first place. So it starts actually to separate certain ways you interact with the chain. What can you do on a transactional basis versus what you need a smart contract for? So when we talk about native assets, this is something which is super important and valuable to actually build certain businesses on Cardano. So to keep it on a high level here, it's about timestamping. So for all the financial transactions where you need to actually validate when does a transaction, what time and place a transaction took place. The authentication, we talk about universities. So we are working with University of Zurich as well as an example, and with other universities. And when you participate in the summer school with the University of Zurich, the certificate will be put on chain so that you can validate on chain the authenticity of the diploma you receive. That's the same what happens on the Cardano Academy and was being pushed on with other institutions. Validation, certification, verifiable credential is something which is very, very important. This goes into counterfeiting fraud. It's actually when you start to have an NFC chip on your shirt, or when you have other solutions you're going to see a bit later on, that you can validate that it's an original. So the metadata allows you a lot of access to actually create transparency and trust into various different industries. And I will give you just a few examples later on as well. Another important thing is about how can we make sure that not a single entity or single person is actually steering the direction of the developments. We talked about a bit the governance model, but then we can also talk about the funding side. And what we have here is an on-chain treasury with Catalyst. It's the way we fund certain projects. So rather than you coming to me and asking for XYZ amount to support your startup or your project, what we have is you can actually apply with the POC, with Project Catalyst. You can say how much money you need for your project, and then any ADA holder can actually go and say yes and no to the proposals. And the ones which have the sufficient amount of votes, they will get funded. So it's actually giving the people the ability to participate and to define in what direction it shall go when you talk about building on the ecosystem. Then governance, as mentioned before, is currently being looked at and is being extended. But the way it works today already is something which is very special in a way that we have actually the community involved. So what it is, you have the so-called SIPs, the Cardano improvement proposals. And what you need to do here is actually, so if there is something which needs to change, we write that there is a SIP is being written. It comes into the change management, which checks it for formality. Then it gets accepted, ideally, or approved. It goes into the change request, where it's actually being documented and updated. And then it goes to the acceptance committee. The acceptance committee, that's actually from the three founding entities and other constitutions being there and checking the validation. Is it feasible or not? But at the end, it's not one single entity deciding yes or no. It goes actually into the last step, which is this right to refusal. So what that means is if we change it on the mainnet, it's actually the stable operators, they have to, the validators, they have to update to the new version. And they can say, we don't like that, we don't update. And if we don't have the majority of stable operators agreeing to update or pre-update onto the new version, it will not be implemented, else you would fork the system, what we don't want to. So it's already here, and this is even getting with the new SIP 1694 and so on, even stronger and better. I mentioned it a bit before, we are here for the decade, so it's not about building something for tomorrow, so it's about maybe a little, let's say, slow but steady, but building really the future social and financial system. So we are planting the trees where our future generations can work in a better way, in a more fair and transparent way. Just to give you one or two small examples of how something like this can look like, what we just spoke about, what I speak before. It's a traceable supply chain solution. What we did here is actually we worked with a Spanish winery called Bias Wines. They had an issue that they had a lot of counterfeits, so there has been a lot of actually bias wines in the market, not original ones, but you never actually knew what type of wine you are drinking. And they have a very strong heritage in wine. So what we looked at with Bias Wine is how can we help them to tamper-proof the wines. So the result is that we worked with ScanTrust. ScanTrust is a Geneva-based company. They can create those tamper-proof QR codes, and those QR codes are very immutable. We have tried various different ways. How can you copy them with the best printers, and just how can you fake those QR codes? You cannot. It's like for everyone here who drives in Switzerland, when you try to remove the vignette, it gets destroyed. So you cannot just remove it and put it on another bottle, and you cannot copying it. So by actually scanning this QR code, what you can do here with this example, we also have on our booth, we have one bottle just to demonstrate it. You will get access to the metadata of this bottle. So there are various different verification processes in between and signature processes as well. The problem we have a bit with blockchain is no one wants to read this. It's not user-friendly. So we also need to upgrade the user experience and the user interfaces. So when you scan it, that you have kind of a picture of the vineyard, that you see who is behind that, what is it actually telling you. So it tells you when the grapes have been harvested and they have been crushed, when they have been shipped. So you can see in this example then that I think it was to Milano, it has been shipped to Milano. So you can also see where it has been sold. And this is becoming important for you as a consumer, that you can validate it's an original one. But it's also important for customs. When you think about the whole customs process today, is it original bottle of wine, and where has it been sold when you think about taxes, right? So if I cross the border with my car packed with wine, going to across the border, and I say, no, it's I already brought it in when I was here before, how do you validate where you bought it? Scan it, and you know where the bottle has been bought. So that changes a lot in the verification process. When we talk about verification, we also look actually into something with the restoration process. And most of you probably have heard about that. But this is still something which is very amazing when we think about what happens in the world today. So especially in Switzerland, you can buy clothes and they're telling you a tree is being replanted. And I believe that they are doing it, but I cannot really validate that. You can drink a beer and they help you to plant a tree and so on and so on. So what we did is we partnered up with Veritree. Veritree is a Canadian reforestation organization. And what we did with them is actually putting the planting of trees onto the blockchain. What we did, that was in 2021, we started actually a so-called Global Impact Challenge. We challenged our community to plant 1 million trees for us to offset carbon. So 1 ADA equals 1 tree, and it took us 3 months to actually get from the community this 1 million ADA to plant 1 million trees. So what happens now? So I give, let's say, 100 ADA, 100 trees. So what's now? What happened is actually, in return to my 100 ADA sent, I received a token, a utility token, which confirmed that I spent or I donated 100 ADA. So 100 trees will be planted. And this is the important thing now here. They will be planted. They haven't been planted yet, back then. And then, once they had the funding, Veritree went on the ground with their partners. For us, it was in Kenya with mangrove trees, and they started planting those trees. And then in batches, when the trees have been planted, it opened up a window where I was able to exchange my utility token into an NFT, which is a native asset with the metadata included, as you've seen before, where you can see the GPS coordination, who planted the tree, subsequence, CO2 subsequence of this specific tree, and so on and so on. So suddenly I can validate my tree on chain, and as it is on chain, it's immutable. It's immutable, and you can counterfeit double counting. What is important with double counting in this sense is that I had that when I was in my grandparents' house. Every now and then I saw a little piece of paper saying, planted a tree, place X, Y, Z. And that's very nice, and that's good. But I can copy this, change the name, and give it to you, give it to you, give it to you, give it to you. You can go on the ground and the tree is there, but you still don't know how often it has been replicated. And this you can counterfeit thanks to blockchain. And this is something which is very, very useful and valuable. And with this, we actually start a lot of discussions when we talk about how can we now bridging centralized systems and how can we change certain ways we are operating today. And one of the recent developments we see is actually with the Scope 3 emissions. So to any of you who is involved in this industry, 70% of the Scope 3 emission are falling back to transportation. And regulators are pushing more and more to actually create transparency on the emission created. So France will be one of the first this year with very high penalties if you don't adhere to those reporting requirements. What we're doing here is we partnered up with Numina Digital. Numina Digital is based here in Zug as well. They are serving quite a lot of well-known companies around the globe, and one of them is one of the largest logistic providers. And with them, they have built a logistic platform where all the companies can start actually providing the data and adding the emission, which then will be accumulated. It will be wrapped up into our proper reporting for validation and verification reasons. Today, that works or that happens in the traditional way in a centralized database. And when you think back, being it the diesel scandal or whatever it is, how reliable are those? I do not say that they are doing it wrong, but when you are a regulator and you want to have transparency, and if you want to have a trusted source, how can we achieve that? Blockchain, in the example you've just seen before, simply said, is a way to get there. And this is something where we now start actually building a new system or building the same system replicated on blockchain, so transforming the centralized system into a decentralized system, where we can start creating carbon emission tokens. Then you can also look at carbon offset tokens, carbon neutrality tokens, and you can start create actually a way for each enterprise to actually demonstrate their efforts to counterfight emissions, but you can also start creating accountability. So why is your emission higher than yours, even though you're in the same industry? So you can start changing behavior by actually raising awareness of what is happening today and where is the journey going. So I've mentioned the Cardano Academy. So to any one of you, we also have a booth out there. You're happy and very welcome to be there for any type of questions with me or my colleagues there. Sign up for the education platform to get an early access. Recommend this, as it is super valuable. And then just a quick highlight here on the Cardano Summit, which will take place 2nd to the 4th in Dubai this year. A very vibrant place where I would love to see as many faces as possible I see here. And with that, that's my email address. And I said I will be outside for questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you very much for the time and having me here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandro.